Welcome to the Sky News Daily. I'm Niall Paterson. And look, hands up, I will admit that we have gone a bit coronation daft here on the podcast desk. Last episode, I took you the length of the country from the Scilly Isles to Scotland, gauging public opinion of Charles and the royals more widely in the run-up to the big day. But there is one interview from my travels that we didn't play.
G'day.
And you've dressed appropriately for us.
Jumper just for you. And I'm feeling the animal magnetism already.
Thank you.
Get in here.
Coming. The author, Kathy Lette, is an avowed Republican. She's also a decades-long friend of the royals.
I think actually I need a tiara to go with it, don't you?
And you can hear more from her on another of our podcasts, Queen Camilla for the Love of Charles. But what you're about to listen to is the long chat that we had at Kathy's home in northwest London. Wearing her corgi jumper, especially for the occasion, and armed with a dozen photo albums, she gave me real insight into what Charles and Camilla are like when the crowns come off.
Because I'm a Republican, I'm from Australia, and I think it's time Australians stood on our own two thongs, and came in from the reign, the monarchy reign. Whenever I'm talking about the royal family, which I do sometimes, I like to be a little bit frivolous because I don't take it all that seriously. Even though they are friends of mine, Charles and Camilla, and I like them very, very much.
You are friends with the royals, but describe yourself as a Republican. Square that circle for me.
Well, you take people as you find them, and Prince Charles, princes are supposed to be charming, and he is charming. And also, I think he was so prescient. I mean, he was way ahead of his time on all those environmental issues, which I can connect with him on that big time. So, you can't help liking them. I would say Charles's charm is more disarming than a UN peacekeeping force.
Really?
And also Camilla, she treats everyone the same from maid to monarch. So she has a strong egalitarian streak, which resonates with me. And if you look at Charles, a lot of his friends, from Spike Milligan to Miriam Margolyes to Stephen Fry, he likes funny, irreverent, mischievous people, which I think is a good sign. So I've always seen myself as his kind of female Falstaff, but whether that remains now that he's been elevated to king, I don't know. We shall see.
It was Camilla that you became friends with first?
Well, yes, I met Camilla in the 90s because she was very good friends with John Mortimer, who wrote the Rumpole series. And at the time, she was public enemy number one. I mean, there's stories about women throwing bread rolls at her in the supermarket and that sort of stuff because she was seen as the other woman and the one who destroyed Diana, which is such a simplistic view of any marriage. She endeared herself to me immediately because she told me that so many American women kept sending her surreptitiously their cosmetic surgeon's cards because they couldn't believe that she would go around looking so wrinkly and crinkly. And of course that just gave her more laughter lines. If you read between those lines, what you'll see is a woman of wit and warmth, empathy, intelligence. She was public enemy number one. She suffered all that emotional and mental abuse for so long from the general public and from the media. Perhaps that's why she is so empathetic with the underdog. She's a great campaigner for women's rights and on literacy and things like that, which chimes with me as well because they're the issues that I care about. So yes, it is an interesting conundrum about how I can like them so much and have such respect and admiration for them, but at the same time not really believe in what they stand for, not in Australia anyway.
But you met her at presumably what was a very, very difficult time for her. I mean, how did the way that she was treated, not just by the press, but by the public, I mean, how did that have an effect on her?
I think what absolutely saved her is her strong female friends. Because, I always say that women are each other's human wonder bras, uplifting, supportive, and making each other look bigger and better.
That's an image I'm not going to be able to shift.
And she has a lot of female friends. In fact, when I said to her, how are you surviving the myopic gaze of the media? It's so ferocious and brutal. And she said, my women friends. And she said, I'm just going off to have lunch with them now. I see them all the time. And they're dear old friends, So she has got that wonderful coterie of broads and dames who make her laugh and cackle. And she has a great sense of humour.
She cannot laugh all the time. And this is clearly a woman who has convictions. As she's made this transition to, Queen Consort, the interests that she had before are going to be even more in the foreground, I would suspect.
Yes, and I think she will still keep campaigning. I mean, she's an interesting character because you think about the time she was coming of age women's liberation was really taking off. I mean, Germaine Greer, women were at the barricades demanding equal pay. But that class of society, I mean, she left school, then they sent her to a finishing school. I mean, what a terrible, like, you're done, you're finished. Now your one job is to get married. So you're like really just a life support system to a womb. There were never any high expectations for her. But despite the fact that she's now the Queen Consort, so she is kind of a human handbag in a way draped over the arm of the King, she is an individual and she's got very strong beliefs and passions, which I know she will keep campaigning for women's rights, keep campaigning against domestic violence, and also literacy, helping the underprivileged kids get access to an education. So I don't think she's going to dip herself in disinfectant in any way.
But in terms of the relationship with Charles, how would you describe the relationship that the two of them have?
Well, as he transitions from, the artist formerly known as Prince, to the King, what is he going to need more than anything? A right royal laugh. He's in his 70s. It's such a huge, onerous burden to take that on when most people his age are slipping on their carpet slippers and doing a little bit of light gardening.
Exactly.
And suddenly, he's got this massive job. So to be able to have someone who can laugh at things. She does not suffer from an irony deficiency. Mm-hmm. She's sceptical. She's not easily led or manipulated, but she's also full of positivity and optimism. She doesn't think optimism is an eye disease, which a lot of you, the Brits, not you, not up there in the north.
No famously dour Scotsman sitting here, obviously.
Many English think that, they've got a kind of Eeyore gene. She's the opposite of that. She's full of life and laughter and love. And when you see them together, first of all, this is a love story that has passed the test of time. Whatever anyone, you can't say that these are not two people who are passionate about each other. She's found her knight in shining Armani. There he is. And in Camilla, he's found a true companion.
When you have such a privileged aristocratic background, how can you relate to people whose lives are completely different from yours?
When she was the public enemy number one, and she understood what it was like to be cast off into social Siberia, and that's when you learn to value your friends. You learn to draw deeply on your own resilience, and it gives you backbone, doesn't it? I mean, it does. It gives you that kind of fortitude. So that must have been absolutely life-changing for her to suddenly find herself in that furnace of fury, of public fury, and to stay the distance has been extraordinary. Even though they are obviously very privileged, they are like a normal couple. They argue about the fact she's always complaining that he likes to throw open the bedroom window at Highgrove and the gale-forced winds coming through. And like all women, she likes to be cosy and warm. And
who gets control of the remote?
That's always the test, isn't it? That's very good. I don't know. I will probe.
Please,
and
find out.
Look, she's so warm and real. I remember one day saying to her, I said, "Oh, you look fantastic, it's a great outfit." And she just leaned over to me and whispered, "Spanx." And I thought, how great to have the future Queen of England telling me about her underwear arrangements. She's like, she's like a real girl. It's proper girl talk.
I think people will be interested in all these insights into Camilla, but also I need to kind of ask about Charles, because at times you will have had an insight into the personality that none of us have ever come close to, and at times he has appeared to be slightly aloof, perhaps slightly standoffish. I mean, what is your impression of the man?
Well, gosh, imagine being born into that world where it's stiff upper everythings at all times. The royal family are the linchpin of the class system, because you meet people in England all the time who say, "Oh, so-and-so, 33rd in line for the throne," or 78th
I have to admit, I don't meet people like that very often. The circles in which we move are different, but I take your point. I do take your point.
I was at a party the other day, and I suddenly realised that everyone at that party had a castle, except for me. I had a bouncy castle. That was about it.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
When the Queen died and Charles was doing those walkabouts, I mean, the public changed their opinion of him, I think.
I saw it, and they were reaching out to touch him in a way that obviously had never happened with the Queen as well.
This was a softening of his image. But people who know him, that is the Charles that we know. I mean, he's actually very self-deprecating. He's funny. He's very funny. His letters are hilarious. When I first met him, which was probably 30 years ago, it was at an event at Australia House. And when he came, he was introduced, we came by we were introduced. And I said to him, well, in Australia we have inverted snobbery. If you can trace yourself back to the first or second fleet of criminals, that makes you Australian royalty. And first and second fleet, I am the creme de la creme. So I said, from one monarch to another, g'day. And once again, his flunkies were like, can't you really talk to him that way? And he just burst out laughing, and then he asked me what my ancestors had been guilty of. And I said, not running fast enough. And then he patted himself down to make sure I hadn't stolen his wallet. And then he was kind of led on to a less mischievous guest. But I could see he really enjoyed not being treated like a porcelain prince. He is different from the upper class, even though he is the pinnacle of the upper class in a way. But, most English people, you have to do open heart surgery to know what's going on inside them, right? Facial expressions by taxidermy. Their voices are so brittle, it's like they've got osteoporosis, vocal osteoporosis. But he's not like that. He has always been so open about his passions about the environment and his passionate love of Camilla, etc. So he's not a typical Englishman, in my view. He's different, and I think the public will absolutely come to see that side of him and love it.
I don't want to pry too much. Well, in fact, I do want to pry too much. To what extent does Diana still cast a shadow over their relationship, do you think?
Oh, gosh, I couldn't really say. That's just such a personal question. The emotional roller coaster they're on a regular basis because it's brought up time and time again. Now they're doing The Crown, etc. So, I thought it was interesting in The Crown, though, how the public attitude has changed in so many ways, because at the time, remember Camilla Gate, remember the recordings when Charles said he wanted to be her tampon, and everyone was so horrified by that. I wasn't at the time. I thought, how great to have a man who's not gynophobic, fabulous. I think people have generally warmed to their relationship because it's so authentic. And, he obviously adores her. He's always saying, my darling wife, my dear wife. I mean, it's so sincere. And also, he's a man of passion. I know we're talking about the fact he was raised in this very stiff environment, but he's always had passions. I mean, he's been so passionate about the environment. And we all made jokes about that in the beginning. He was so ahead of his time. I used to make jokes about, Prince Charles hugging his shoe trees. I mean, we all did. And looking back, he was so right. And he was ridiculed constantly, but he always held firm to his passionate views on the environment. And now, of course, we've caught up. And it'll be interesting to see if he resonates with young people because, of course, especially in Australia, Australia's the most multicultural nation in the world, and we're like a human minestrone. And, why would our new immigrants bear any allegiance to a monarch 12,000 miles away in a castle-encrusted environment? But he does reach across the generation divide through his environmental concerns. So it'll be really interesting to see if he chimes with the next generation. I don't know. How
important was it to both of them that Camilla would be queen? I mean, that was obviously something that was in the gift of Queen Elizabeth herself, and she made a real point of that announcement, which frankly, when I heard it, I think it took us all pretty much by surprise. Perhaps not those who were in the inner circle.
Oh, and I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, anyone can see that it's a love match, but particularly if you're in their family, and also to legitimise this long, tortuous romance they've had, to actually give it the stamp of approval. And yeah, it had to be. And she'll be fabulous.
Isn't that one of the important things for the Royals moving forward? That if they're not more of the 21st century than they have been in the past, then the time might be up.
Well, modernising the royal family is oxymoronic because it's a feudal system, isn't it? Like serfs up. The only way to stay vaguely relevant is to become more accessible and to slim down, become more useful, which are all the things that Charles is doing. So, we'll see.
Do you think that the royal family will be here in this form 100 years from now? As a Republican yourself, do you see significant longevity to this royal family?
Not in the Commonwealth. Britain becomes less and less relevant to the rest of the world. So I think that will fade and shrink. I mean, if you talk to most Australians about the Queen, they thought you were talking about Elton John. So, you know, and the same with talking about the King. I mean, they'll think you're talking about Elvis Presley. So for overseas, no. But in Britain, I don't know. This is a country that hemorrhages history. There's a host of ghosts in every nook and cranny. So even just for nostalgic reasons, you know, like a museum piece, you might keep this show rolling. But then again, perhaps it'll become like a theme park where you can pay to go in and be king for the day and sit on the throne. I mean, I don't know. We shall see.
Kathy, it's been lovely chatting to you. Thanks for having me.
My thanks to Kathy and, of course, to you for listening to the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson. This edition was produced by Annie Joyce. Our editor is Philly Beaumont. And just a quick reminder, if you're interested in watching my documentary, it's called My King, My Country, and you can find it on our on-demand services, including YouTube, Sky Q and Catch Up.